Warning. The following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
1999, pivotal year in film. A lot of big events. We had The Matrix, we had Star Wars, Phantom Menace, Fight Club, amongst many, but one that, dare I say, has been tarnished over the years unfairly. That is 1999's Wild Wild West. And here to talk about it is my Wiki Wild office partner, Miss Danielle Radford.
Hello, slash you're the worst.
Actually, I wanted to do this one like a long time ago. Literally could not find a single person that would rewatch it to do this episode. And then it just so happened you guys did the Honest trailer. It's like, well, I have a whole new crop of people to bother to do this.
Talk about my favorite movie with his, not mine. Let's be clear.
I mean, but it was like one of those things because so if people don't know, Danielle's on the Honest Trailers writing team. So she's always watching something,
right.
Making notes and stuff. And usually I'm just kind of like, oh, what are you guys doing this week? Oh, Batman, cool. And then I'll, leave you to do your thing. But Wild Wild West, I feel like I just like tapped you on the shoulder at least 20 times because you had to watch these movies a couple times.
Sometimes, yeah. Like sometimes you don't have to. But when I do, typically, because that was one I did the first draft for, like a lot of times a little inside baseball, but very often one of us will do the first draft of something,
right.
And then we'll give it to Spenny, and then he will do a pass on it, and then we'll all get together and do passes and stuff. So because we're all working on a million things at once,
right?
And so this way it's like everyone's kind of sharing the load, and the person who does the first draft, it's the biggest load of the thing. And so oftentimes when I'm doing the first draft, I will watch a movie twice. At least, just so I can like get through it. And even if not, like what'll happen is if I watch it once and then I notice something that I hadn't been tracking the whole time, then I like speed through it so I can like get time codes so
right.
that we have, hey, like this could be a funny run, or this could be, I noticed they say this word a lot, and what is this nonsense that keeps happening?
Someone has to make the skeleton.
Yeah, someone has to make the skeleton.
And I remember
most of the editing, heavy lifting goes to our editing team. But
right.
We try to make it as easy for them as we can because they do a lot of work.
I remember you watching this and just thinking to myself, good luck trying to find anything to make fun of.
Are you? Okay. I remember that. There were debates because we share an office. It's me, him, and Eric. And he would literally be tapping me and be like, did we get to? Did you get to the part?
Did you get to the part where
this part? Did you get to that part? Oh, but what'd you think of this? Oh, how did you hate that? I don't get it.
Let me be clear. I'm not saying that Wild Wild West is the greatest movie ever. I'm not. I'm not saying it's the best movie of '99. I'm not even saying it's the best Will Smith movie, although it's a candidate. What I am saying is that this movie frequently pops up on like worst movie ever lists, and I truly don't get it, because to me, this is literally Men in Black in the Old West.
It absolutely isn't, though, because with Men in Black, the reason why that works is because you have Will Smith doing Will Smith at a very straight-laced Tommy Lee Jones, and that's why that dynamic works. In Wild Wild West, you have Will Smith, who's kind of serious, but then kind of funny, but then they do this thing where I feel... because one thing I know about this, because I also wind up doing a lot of research on movies, in case something interesting comes up that we want to talk about, is that they had to go back and do reshoots because test audiences didn't know if it was supposed to be a comedy. And so one thing that they do, I think, is they rely too much on Will Smith to bring his Will Smithiness to it. And this is something that we did in the Honest trailer, where they'll just have him yell something as though that suddenly makes it a punchline, and it certainly does not. And then with Kevin Kline's character, sometimes he's silly, and sometimes he's serious, and sometimes he's wacky. And so neither one of them get to be, the straight man or the whatever. And it'd be one thing if they were both just really funny characters all the time, like the Bad Boys thing, where they're really funny characters, but they're different in other ways. This is, the dynamic just doesn't ever work.
See, here's what I like about it, was because if you had it like, just like Men in Black, Then Kevin Kline's character, Artemis Gordon, he's just kind of like boring. But I like that this is almost a reversal of the Men in Black, where instead of like, Jay was the fish out of water and Agent K had to kind of walk him through everything. Here, it's almost the other way around, where Artemis is the one that's always kind of like, even when he's serious, he's really not. He's kind of loopy. He's kind of like the mad scientist.
Right.
And Jim West, still Jay, it still counts. Jim West is the one that's like, I want to do this, the bronze, use my brawn, use my gun.
He's
I'm
very
Will Smith.
serious.
He's super cool.
He's very serious. He learned all those gun tricks. God bless him. Yeah, and I think that that's also the problem, is that you very often have a very serious Will Smith where he has to be the one. Kevin Kline will be doing something goofy, and then Will Smith has to be the one rolling his eyes. That is not what you cast Will Smith for, especially to quote one Mr. Hal Rudnick, at the height of his powers, Will Smith. That is not what you don't cast him to be like eye rolling, like, oh, take a look at this funny guy. He's not the Ross.
But
he gets
his licks at the very beginning. He's making out, as you pointed out, in the most unsanitary place possible, which is the town water supply.
Why are they boning in the water supply?
I mean, that tells me everything I need to know about his character. He's kind of a selfish, carefree person, which by the end he kind of comes full circle-ish. But the thing is, he's doing the Will Smith thing where like he's kind of trying to look around for crime, and she's like kissing, and then he's making out and doesn't even realize that he's not making out with anything. That's hilarious.
No, it's not.
Why is that not funny?
I think it's, and I don't think this is a Will Smith thing. I think it's, again, the timing. Like, they kept repeating that, like, I'm not working, and then he does the kiss, and then he pulls away and he does it. Another thing that this movie does is that it lingers on stuff too long for the joke to land. A lot of what works with jokes is the editing, whether something is quick. If you hang on to something, you're hanging on to it for a purpose. And a lot of these jokes are a little drawn out, and I haven't even gotten to the horny yet.
I mean, this movie is the horniest.
It is the horniest.
Like, showgirls watched this movie and needed a cold shower.
Yeah.
But I will say, in 1999, I'm like 12 years old. I'm the horniest. So yeah. It worked. It didn't seem that weird to me. Kenneth Branagh is a guy who lets you know many times that he has no penis anymore, and then he makes a penis as a weapon. This is hilarious. It's great.
That's also weird. Why did they lean so hard into this dude being disabled as like the back and forth? And granted, like, yeah, he also did a bunch of racist jokes. Also, I'm sorry, there are so many things for me to pick apart in this. Maybe the giant spider, big robot dick movie is not the movie to take on the seriousness of post-slavery America.
I'm not going to argue with that on that point, because when you watch this movie, like, here's the thing. By the way, because you asked, like, why go the disabled route? It's actually weird because in the TV show, Loveless was a dwarf. And then they're like, well, let's just switch it out for something else. I don't know why. They made a lot of changes from the TV show. I digress.
TV show's Jim West, by the way, went to go pick up the movie's Razzies and
he
publicly disavowed it.
He hated it. But I don't take that into consideration, because a lot of times, like, Adam West was not a fan of, like, the Burton Batmans because they didn't ask him to be Batman. It's like, come on, dude.
You aged out.
Right. Let's keep our expectations. But I will agree with you that they start to, because I feel like the movie thinks that it has to justify why Jim West, like a marshal, is black.
Right.
Especially like in this time period.
And but for me, it's like, well, because you cast Will Smith and he's black, I don't know that we need a whole lot of like, oh, this guy gunned down a bunch of freed slaves and his sad slavery past. I don't want that in my giant robot spider robot dick movie.
I mean, the thing is, and this is why like I'm agreeing with you on this point, is because we've already established 30 seconds into this movie, this is like an alt history, America, like nothing is in the time place it should be. So yes, if Jim West is black and has a position of authority in the United States at that time, that's just the history of that version of the
steampunk.
world.
We don't have to, it's that thing where people are always like, well, they don't necessarily need to be more black people because this is based, talking about like Game of Thrones.
Sure.
This is based on, Europe Europe and the blah, blah. It's like, dude, there's dragons. We don't have to play this game. There's dragons. You can do whatever you want. And I feel the same way with this, whereas this is actually trying to justify it. It's like, look at all the steampunky stuff. Like, it's fine. We don't need you to justify why Jim West
Right.
is
And I mean,
black.
you already
Yeah.
get over the fact in the movie that Arliss, he was like a Confederate soldier that, they lost the war and now he wants to kind of take over what he feels is his. Like, that's all you really needed
You don't need
out
much.
of it. Yeah. You don't need to go into it. So I will give you that, because also it's like it comes up and then it goes away for 20 minutes and then it's sprinkled in for a couple seconds
Yeah.
and then it goes away for an hour and then like a really weird, like, I'll be back, hasta la vista, baby type catchphrase at the end, which you're
doesn't-
like, whoa.
I think that they were trying to, again, I think this is the
Right.
thing, is they were trying to get Will Smith. And so, now that's a whooping is no, I make this look good,
Like, kids aren't going to be playing, Wild Wild West at school and be like, that's a whooping, boy. Like, that would get you sent to the principal's office so
Immediately.
fast. So, yeah, I don't know what they were going for there. Like, that's not your hasta la vista, baby. Nice try. Actually,
Yeah.
not nice try.
Yeah.
Like, that should have been...
That's a draft one, my buds. That's not.
Well, that's what it feels like. It feels like there was another draft of this where like the slavery and the gunning down was like a much bigger part of Jim
Right.
West's motivation.
And I
then
think
it was,
that's
right.
why they cut it to make it more of a comedy. And so they take away the slavery and all of that stuff and then added in boobs
Right. Now, the other
and butt
thing...
flaps and weird thongs for no
The
reason.
thong is weird. The thong is weird. Again,
Why is she rubbing her butt all over this poor person's desk?
I mean...
Sorry, we're also taking for granted that maybe you've seen this movie recently. I'm sorry, listener.
I mean, why? So it's Bai Ling, right?
Bai Ling.
It's Bai Ling, and she's
Back
like...
when they were trying to make her a thing.
Yeah, she was like, there's a scene where she seduces Jim West, or tries to seduce him. She's in this very beautiful costume.
West meets East. Okay, writers, we get it.
Yeah, we know geography. And then she's in this beautiful costume, this beautiful dress. And then there's the shot of her like sitting on a desk and it's just like, oh, she's like in a thong. Like there's no reason for it.
Yeah, literally, in order for us to see the thong, she lifts up the back of her skirt and then sits down, which is, by the way, not what you do when you wear a skirt. Anybody who works around me knows I'm literally smoothing down skirts all day long.
Sounds like a rap song. Smoothing down skirts.
Smoothing down skirts. But yeah, because what you do is like you run your hands through, past your butt, and that way that makes sure that the skirt doesn't, you don't accidentally show something you don't want to show when you're sitting down.
Sure.
She is doing the opposite. The movie wants us to see that butt.
Agreed.
Back when thongs were a thing. Maybe
mean,
that was just maybe that was their tribute to the thong song,
Which
since
was
they did-
like number one on the charts that whole summer.
Yeah.
Like that was, you have to remember, this movie is very much a time capsule.
Yeah.
Because even some that like, I think this movie, there's parts in it that like genuinely make me laugh. I'm like, that's pretty funny. Then there are other jokes where I'm like, oh, we've come a long way. Like, like a big runner in this movie is like, it's hilarious when men dress up as women.
right.
Like maybe it's amusing once because they find like another person at the party that actually looks like a real, that looks like Artemis Gordon, but then you find out it's not. Like, sure, if you have to go to that well, you did it
Right.
once. They do it like 4 times in this movie.
This movie loves drag.
Yes.
It loves drag. But again, not in that way where, it very much in that Bugs Bunny, like, see, look how funny it is.
It's not fetishized. It's
Yeah.
like 100% like for the like TGIF joke of, Danny Tanner and Uncle Joey having to dress up as women at the sorority, which is a real episode.
When are you going to finally do your TJIF podcast?
It's coming.
You got to get on it.
Right?
Right after we do the one where I explain pop culture to you.
Yeah. Did you know Old Town Road's a song?
Billy didn't until very recently.
So all I've been talking about so far are the things that I agree are not good. Right. But I think that this movie has some really freaking cool action sequences that people just completely ignore. I think like one of my favorites is when they have the big metal collars on and the magnetic blades. Like that's a fun sequence.
That to me, I think it would have been a fun like them running and stuff through the cornfield. All of that actually looks great. It looks fine. But of course, as with everything in this movie, it ends on a dick joke. It ends with the collars wind up getting magnetized.
It's his
they
belt
get stuck
buckle.
Together. But that ain't what they trying to say.
But it's still like
the point of it is supposed to be a man's head is in another man's crotch. That is the point of that joke.
okay, but that doesn't negate the whole like really cool 5 minutes that preceded it.
See,
like,
to
it's
me,
still
it kind of because
cool...
it's all part of that same run. It's all part of that same scene, you know, where they're running and they run from all the stuff, and then you know their things get ka-chunked together, and I can't think of a better way.
No, ka-chunked is 100% the correct vernacular for it.
Yeah, you know, their magnets get stuck, and you know that's all part of one big. You know, that's how the scene ends. That's how that's resolved. So I can't divorce it from the action that came before it. And yeah, it doesn't look bad. Like them running through the cornfields looks great.
I think it's really cool. I think the train is really cool. I love the concept of like, you know, Jim West bumping into things and then he gets on the pool table and it like turns inside out. Like all of the train is awesome. Don't sigh.
I'm not saying that the train isn't awesome. Hold on. First of all, I think we can both agree that the production value on this movie is stupid good.
It's the production design is so freaking awesome.
It's pretty great.
This movie.
It would really suck to be the person that poured all of their everything into this production design because it is gorgeous. Costume design is gorgeous, and then it winds up being Wild Wild West. But parts of that with the train, it was so goofy because it kept, you know, he gets in there and then he gets locked in and then he goes upside down so you could see the train tracks, and then he magically knows which lever to pull so that all of a sudden now Kevin Kline is also upside down on the train tracks, and they're like, let's work together. It's just this series of like weird, goofy gadget nonsense.
But again, that's why I say like Men in Black has a ton of those scenes, and yet we're like totally cool with it. But you put it in Wild Wild West, and it's like the worst thing you've ever seen.
It's execution. It's a thing about execution in the way that it was done. It was done. It was executed well in Men in Black. It was not executed well in this.
I humbly disagree. Let's talk about Kenneth Branagh because we talked a little bit about Arliss Lovelace. A very strange character, but you know what? Like I adore villains in movies, especially these types of movies that are just so over the top that it's like a blast to watch. Like my other favorite is Treat Williams in The Phantom, where he's just like, no one is having more fun than Xander Drax in The Phantom or Kenneth Branagh in this.
I will totally agree with you on this one. Like this is, Kenneth Branagh has made fun of himself for it, but to me it felt very much like he is the only person, and I've said this before about people, but there in bad movies, there's usually one person, one actor who no one else knows what movie they're in. They know exactly what movie this is, and he knew what movie it was, and it looked like he was having a blast with his terrible, terrible accent.
The accent is so perfect. Like, Mr. West, I'm going to pump you with my steam penis. You know,
something hard and steely. it's not great.
It is great.
No,
though.
he is. But I will gladly say he took the material that he had and he ran with it, and he's good at acting.
I guess I see like
his weird little Tony Stark beard.
I mean that was peak facial hair for 99.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
It's pretty. He looks like every dude who's ever served me a cocktail in Silver Lake.
Danielle, would you like a cocktail? Hard and steely.
Got a mint and julep.
See, I guess to me, and it's funny you say that because like I see through my like Billy Business lens of watching this movie, like I see the whole movie like that. Like the minute I see the guy in the first 30 seconds with a freaking little record player for an ear, I'm like, oh, okay, this is all just like stupid, silly, and I have fun. Okay,
so this brings me to another thing. This movie is like gross. It's got a lot of really gross sequences. When ear horn head dude like I'm like gonna throw up thinking about it. Like tips his ear horn upside down so that the wax comes out. Oh my god, I'm like literally gonna throw up.
You should never come with me to my ear, nose, throat doctor.
No, I shouldn't. And I didn't know I was invited, and I'm RSVPing no. It's a smooth no. I'll send along a gift card.
Some of us have very small ear canals and we can't help it. We need medical assistance. And I don't want to be shamed on my own podcast for it.
Well, yeah, but see, that's a medical procedure in a medical office, or when they're just holding around a head, just like a disembodied head. Oh, and then there's another one of those jokes where, this one wasn't a yelling joke, but this was a have Will Smith repeat something and that'll make it a joke.
Okay.
Where he just keeps going, that's a man's head. That's a man's head. That's a man's head. It doesn't...
Just in case you weren't clear.
...aggressively get funnier. We know. And so, yeah, there's a lot of really
But again,
gross,
that's
stuff.
a Barry Sonnenfeld thing, because I know I keep going back to it, but there's a lot of Men in Black's a really gross movie too. There's goo and roaches and dead bodies.
It is very
heads.
goopy. It is a very goopy movie. In fact, I believe we almost called it a goopy movie. I think during one of our titles when we did Men in Black. But I feel like that feels different because that feels more like fantasy violence, because those are aliens that explode into goop. They're not real. They look very not real. There isn't human decapitations. There aren't human things of those nature. And the goop even, it looks fantasy goopy. It's not, that ear stuff looked like earwax.
I mean, I don't know. I guess I just see a guy with a record player for an ear, and yes, he is human in this world, but I almost have that Men in Black mentality of this isn't literally if you went to my ear doctor and watched me get my ears cleaned, it's not the same thing as, the guy with his little RCA thing cleaning it out. It's just it's all fantasy. It's all stupid. It's not in reality, which is why the gun down free slaves thing feels so weird, because it's this is if Mikey the alien from Men in Black was at Auschwitz. Right. It's what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Pick a lane.
This does not belong here. Leave these things. This is not chocolate and peanut butter goes together.
Right. So that's why I'm saying pick a lane. I just pick the lane when I watch this of this is stupid fantasy. And in that case, I think it's so unrealistic, but it's fun to think of oh yeah, you have a memory burned in your head, so let's make your head a projector.
I just don't. If it was funny, anything works if it's funny, right? It just, for me, the jokes do not land. And they're also they're not really written by, I believe they were written by the Predator guys. They're not really written by a bunch of joke writers necessarily, this movie.
Well, here comes your... I write jokes. I know jokes.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that, you should probably have some joke writers on your joke movie. I couldn't write Predator movies.
I bet you could, actually. I always say, this is a slight diverging, but I always say, if you're a really big fan of something, you probably shouldn't write for it. But if you're a middle of the road fan, you could probably do a pretty good version of anything.
Oh, because you're not slavishly I have to do all the things.
I have to fit in these 5 different things that don't relate, but I'll make them relate.
I have to do these tropes. I have to do this thing. Here's my favorite thing. I have to repeat it.
Right. Let's talk about the 10-ton spider in the room. So I can only imagine in a drug-filled stupor that a vision of a mechanical spider came to John Peters, and it was his life's mission to put it in a movie somewhere.
I've always imagined that maybe he is part of a spider worshipping cult, and this was the price he had to pay to retain his fame and fortune.
It's if you look to
the Spy Looter Nami.
The development of this movie, he wanted to put it in Superman. He wanted to put it in a version of Sandman that never ended up happening. Mm-hmm. I feel like if you have to put it in a movie, it fits perfectly in this movie. I think the spider set piece is pretty freaking awesome in this movie.
I will say that they don't explain why this dude loves spiders, which is weird because they explain everything else. Anything else, whatever's happening on screen, they're going to talk about it. If it's somebody has big old boobies, they're going to talk about it. If it's someone is Asian, they're going to talk about it. If it's, someone is disabled, they're going to talk about it at length. If someone's black, they're going to talk about it. They talk about all of these things.
It's great if you're visually impaired, because then they'll just tell you.
They'll just tell you exactly. Yeah. I don't know that you would even need to have assistant with that. But So the spider thing is just kind of there in the background where you'll see that he has a spider crest and a spider totem. And then he's got various big and small versions of spider things. And they never explain it, but they take so much time to point out and explain everything else that the spider is just like, what?
Because now that's how he sees himself. And he literally becomes... Maybe not literally, but he becomes a version of a spider at the end of this movie. Yeah, because he both
pilots the giant spider and he designs a chair that has four spider legs. You're doing a lot of the work for that explanation that the movie did not do. You're doing a lot of it's because that's how he sees himself. Okay. I think the movie should tell me that and not Billy Business 20 years later.
Is he going to have a monologue where he's like, I like spiders? Because that would be the worst part of that movie.
He have a monologue where he explained that even though you think I ain't got no dick, look at it, it's big and hard and steely. He explains
That's character building. Because he is
You don't think the obsession with spiders to such a degree that everything that you do has a little spider emblem on it, that you create a device that has spider legs on it that you can strap yourself in and move around. You create a giant spider to terrorize a town. You don't think that might be an important part of his character?
Would I personally appreciate a monologue about the sexual mating habits of a spider as it pertained to his wanting a big penis and also wanting spider legs? Great. If you could have wrapped that all up, great.
I'm sure someone tried, because there has to
be a monologue where it's like, did you know that the Black Widow, I'm sure there's gotta be somewhere. But look, he likes spiders. They're scary. They're not an animal. They're like an insect. They're a scary insect, but they also, they can move really fast. It doesn't matter. It's cool looking. The set piece is cool looking. He's a spider. I don't have to know why Edgar was a bug in Men in Black. He was just a roach. No one likes roaches. They're gross.
He was a roach alien. That makes more sense. And again, Men in Black, other than explaining the things that you needed to explain, the exposition that you need for this world, Men in Black didn't take time. Men in Black wasn't constantly reminding us that Will Smith was black.
Well, no, but he does call it out. He makes jokes about it.
Right, but other people in the room aren't like, hey, you're black, that's weird.
Well, it's also not like the 1800s in the Old West, but I've already conceded.
Oh, no, I know. But that's why I'm saying that's why it's weird. If this were a movie where it weren't constantly calling out everything in the way that a kid's like, haha, East meets West, get it? Because she's Asian. If it wasn't that movie already, then yeah, it wouldn't matter. Big spider comes out, looks really cool. Sweet. I'm on board. I don't necessarily need a bunch of exposition. I don't need to know the version of, my Uncle Ben died, but instead it's the spider. It just is weird because the movie spends so much time with every other part of it.
You're not wrong. All I can do is evaluate what is being put in front of my face. And when I was a kid and I went and saw this movie, I made my dad take me, which, by the way, every terrible movie I've ever seen, I feel like I made my dad take me. He took me to Steel. He took me to this.
That's cute.
Poor dad.
Poor dad.
But I think that when I saw, they're on their little kite airplane thing, and then they zoom in and they're flying, and then they land on this big mechanical spider. It was great. I had no complaints. I was like, this is cool. I like this. I like this a lot.
The plane is another one where they just kept having this one. They did both of them at once. One was he just kept repeating Gordon's name, Gordon, and then at the end he was yelling Gordon's name, Gordon. And so that was a combination of two of the kind of jokes that they tell.
But I didn't even see that as a joke. That's just someone that's like, are we gonna do this? Are we gonna do it? Don't do that. Blah. That's not. It doesn't have to be a joke.
No, I think it's definitely meant to be funny.
I mean, the fact that he's scared of doing this is funny.
Yeah, and then the way that they do the drop and then it comes back out, it's definitely meant to be funny. I think that is meant to be, you're meant to laugh at his cowardice and
sure. And so I think that's a very natural way of doing this. If we were speeding down the highway in a car, I would be like, Danielle, stop.
Well, if I'm driving in a car, you've already got problems. Yeah. I have no license.
Okay, well.
I've never had one. I didn't lose it for anything, you guys. I've just never had a license. It's just a weird Danielle fact.
How did you get into like R-rated movies when you were 17?
They have ID cards. I have an ID.
Ah.
Yeah. You can just get an ID card without having a driver's license.
Oh, I didn't know that. The more you know. I do also like. The other thing that I really like about this movie that like, I'm sure you couldn't hum it if someone put a gun to your head, but I love the score of this movie. They took the main theme, which I thought was really cool. It's just like a really like when you're in the movie, it's like a very like victorious like yeah.
Yeah, and then it'll cut to like the Will Smith part where it's like boom, 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 boom.
I happen to like that. I don't know. Maybe this is just like really boils down to.
Well, it's not even like it's not like they remix the theme and do it. It'll literally be like the dun, 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 like the very victorious like westerny theme, and then it'll just stop and become the.
No, it will like cut to like almost like like a Shaft type like.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it, but I like it because that to me encompasses this whole movie. It's like this classic Western, which by the way, at this point, like maybe besides like Tombstone and Unforgiven, which were like very big movies, like Westerns were not really something that you saw. So
not in the late 90s. It was more of an early 90s thing. Early 90s were a lot of Westerns and romanticized and all that stuff. But that had petered out by the late 90s.
You take this genre of Westerns, which is very classic, which is where you get like the main score, but then you take like a modern sensibility and you kind of do a girl talk mashup. And I feel like that's what the movie is. I feel like that's what the score is. And I feel like that's why I really like it.
I'm glad you enjoy it, Billy.
But that's what the movie is. The movie is definitely like, let's take this like romanticized time and then throw in a bunch of like steampunk modern elements. And I feel like everyone thinks that steampunk is kind of like this embarrassing thing now. Like
I mean, we make fun of it because it's overused. My thing is, this movie, it does have all of the elements that should make it successful. It has got Will Smith in the late 90s. It's got, steampunk, weird technology, Western. On paper, this movie should be really good. I get why people were quick to buy it. I get why people were quick to sign on to make this movie made. It's just it's just not a story that's told well. But it has all of the elements of what could have been a really cool movie, including the big stupid spider.
I mean, I just like I watched the trailer before we recorded this. It's just like I feel like you should have known exactly what this movie was before you saw it. There's nothing misleading in that trailer. Like if you walked into that movie and were like, "What was that?" Like if you saw the trailer, I don't really feel that bad.
Well, as far as any of the elements of the movie, I feel like everyone went in knowing what the movie was going to be. It just was the execution was lacking.
I have yet to hear besides the weird racial subplots.
The jokes don't land
For you.
For me and most people, judging by the fact that you're constantly having to defend it.
But most people actually didn't see this movie. Now, this was one thing that like Will Smith always talks about was like he was expecting this to be like his third big summer opening, and it kind of fell flat on its face. Like a lot of people just didn't end up seeing it, period.
Yeah, right, because of the reviews and because other people were like, this is bad. That is one thing I'm never a huge fan of people talking about how bad a movie is if they haven't seen it.
Right.
You can be like, woof, I've heard bad things. I get that. But just being like, oh, it's the worst movie ever. Well, have you seen it? No. Well, that's not super great. Like, you should be informed about your opinion. I mean, you can do whatever you want.
I just
also,
don't think...
This is why we didn't get Will Smith in The Matrix, you guys, was because he signed on to do Wild Wild West.
Yeah, I mean, and we got The Matrix, which was awesome. Wouldn't you have rather had things play out the way it did?
Oh, no, this was for the greater good. The greater good. But it didn't serve this movie.
I think this movie was always going to be what it was, no matter if you had Will Smith or George Clooney was actually going to be in this movie. He eventually had to pass.
I guess I don't know who it's for. It's got all the wacky gadgets and silly stuff that a kid would really dig, and then it's got all of the weird, but maybe doesn't necessarily work for adults, and then it's got all of this weird historical stuff that would definitely not play for kids and they would not get it and seems out of place with it, with all of the goofiness that comes with it. And then it's got all of this super horny, sexy stuff, which is definitely not for kids and not necessarily funny enough to be for adults. There's no reason why I need to see Selma Hayek's butt flap. There's definitely no reason why they need to do that whole back and forth exchange that they do where, she's a breath of fresh air and where they just keep he's so in love with her booty and with her boobs that he's accidentally, sleepily replacing, breast with this and all of these other things. That run is one of the worst things I have seen in a comedy.
But to be fair, and you're not wrong. Mm-hmm. You're not wrong. But this is what I guess what I was trying to get at is that was a trope in a lot of comedies at the time. It's you can't point the finger at Wild Wild West it was the one that originated it and then it never happened again.
Where else was that one in where they did that?
I mean, that was just a thing in the 90s. I can't remember what TV show it was, but they were he was talking to a hot girl and he was Nia sex time. I mean, see you next time.
Oh, yeah, but they would be quick. It would be, and I think if they would have done one instead of as long, and again, that's another example of hanging onto the joke for too long. If they would have done one of those where he did it and it was instead of, I believe that exchange, it feels like an hour, but that exchange.
Yep, it was half the runtime.
But I want to say that he did at least 5 of those, or 4 or 5, where he's, a breast of fresh air, a something of butt, ass and a thing, and there was no real, and the only resolution to it was at the end. I think he opened his eyes oh, I can't believe I said that, or what. And then Will does more hat stuff because he did a lot of hat stuff in the movie. But if you do that once and then let that go, then that's funnier. But you can't keep milking that well because it's not a lot there. It's funny as a one-off.
Again, not saying you're wrong, that this movie isn't guilty of that. Just saying that it's it's not the only movie that had done that.
And any other movie where they would have taken that specific joke that far, I would also say, if I was to watch it, you wrap it up, boys.
I mean, I feel like that's every early 2000s, maybe late 90s Adam Sandler movie where they go on these runs of very right when we all started to
those.
That's fine. You don't have to. A lot of them I don't like either.
Yeah.
But I'm saying I feel like Wild Wild West takes the brunt of a lot of things that other movies did too. They just weren't it wasn't everyone was waiting for the next Will Smith movie.
Well, no, and that's exactly what it is because Will Smith and Barry Sonnenfeld, they ran the 90s. Barry Sonnenfeld had so many hits, dominated summers in the 90s. Will Smith, so many hits, dominated summers. And so I think the reason why this gets so much shit is because you take these two powerhouses who on their own and different properties have killed the box office and amazing things, came together and made one of the funniest movies, one of the funniest comedies for some people of all time, definitely one of the funniest sci-fi comedies. And you're oh, the next thing they're going to do, it's going to be crazy. Sonnenfeld and Will Smith, of course it's going to blow your mind. And then you get there and minds are not blown. And so that has expectation will kill you every time. And that had the expectation from everyone that, of course, you put these two together and you were going to get nothing but steak. It's going to be amazing. And then it wound up being mostly just sizzle.
Do you think if Independence Day wasn't a thing and Men in Black wasn't a thing and it was oh, Will Smith, the guy from the TV show and the rapper, he's doing his first movie, do you think this might have gone over a little easier than wait a second, you are the king of summer?
Yes, it absolutely would have. Absolutely. Or if you put anyone else in that role, it would be oh, that wasn't, but you don't get, the reason why it's like this is because people are comparing it to their past successes.
Sure.
And even though I think consciously most people aren't still making that connection because we're so far removed from that you lose that part of the story and it just becomes this was one of the worst movies of all time independently from all of that. Even though everyone also has the context of that Peters thing, and so that also makes it weird.
Right.
Subconsciously, I feel hopefully people recognize that is why. Anyone else at any other time, you know, and that movie, it changed the trajectory. Like after this, I believe was after they shot it, at least I believe was when Will Smith started doing his like, I'm going to be a serious actor now.
Ollie,
yeah. And he got into that. And so obviously then that going back again, putting things on the movie that I think a lot of people don't recognize are there. People naturally go, well, of course, like he knew he knew Wild Wild West was so bad that he wanted to stop doing comedies and go do something else. And they blame it on that movie. And of course, and I think Ali or one of them came out before Wild Wild West, but definitely after shooting. So I don't, you can't divorce it from that context.
I just think too, like, if you say this is one of the worst movies of all time, like, I challenge you to watch more movies.
It's pretty terrible. I don't know. I would never say that it's one of the worst. It's one of the worst movies. It's one of the worst, like, it's definitely the worst Will Smith comedy. I'm trying to go about that. Comedy.
I know. Like, Hitch? Here's the thing. Like, whether you like this movie or not, obviously we're never going to agree about whether we like the movie. But, like, narratively, even though some things are like, what? At least from start to finish, you can track what the story is. Even if it's not a good story, you know what's happening.
Kind of?
No.
Not really. Because
you absolutely know what's happening.
You don't really figure it out until the end. You just know that there's these two marshals and the president puts them together and they have to track down, you know, they're both trying to track down Earhorn Dude. And then they find out that Earhorn Dude didn't do the thing that they thought Earhorn Dude was going to do. And then it turned out it's Loveless. And you can kind of track the story down, but none of it really... Ultimately, I feel like the plot of the story is just there. It doesn't matter. It's about getting out the goofy gadgets.
But narratively, it makes sense. The fact that you were able to at least say that much, like, we have both seen films where, like, I know I watched it. I couldn't tell you what happened because I truly don't understand. Like, it's not the worst ever. And as a kid, we went to Las Vegas. I remember this trip. And I went in Caesar's Palace Mall, and they had a Warner Brothers store. And it was $19.99. I could have gotten a bunch of Matrix stuff, could have gotten a bunch of other stuff. I spent all my fun vacation money, and I got every Wild Wild West action figure that they had. And I think somewhere I still have my Arliss Loveless half man, half spider action figure.
That's adorable.
There was also, before we leave, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up that the music video for Wild Wild West.
Also, wait, one more thing that I have to mention is the women do nothing, and there is no purpose for them. There is no purpose for Salma Hayek to be there, or at least to have lied about the fact that that is not her father, but was her husband.
Sure.
There was no reason. They just wanted to do that so that they could have sexual tension and we would be okay sexualizing her. She was just there to be hot, and
Agreed.
That's fine. And all of the women are just there to be hot. Okay,
Agreed. Agreed. Also not the only movie guilty of it.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
No.
That was just sign of the times.
Mm-hmm.
The Wild Wild West music video.
Yes.
Great music video. Also,
I think the music video is better than the movie. Will Smith seems to, and I'm sorry, this is something I didn't. Also, I feel like Will Smith somewhere during the production of that movie, I don't know if it's because they were relying on him too much and they figured he would just do some as Will Smith riffing,
right,
and they wouldn't have to do as much stuff in the script. But there are points in which you can tell Will Smith is done. He is phoning it in. And I didn't even recognize that until I watched the music video with a fully and completely engaged Will Smith. And I went, oh, he phoned a lot of that in.
It's just like if you haven't seen the movie and you watch the music video first, which I feel like was most of us at the time, like, right, it's a very misleading music video because narratively it's like it feels like it should be connected to the movie, but it's like, well, the continuity makes no sense.
No.
Because it's like they're dating, and like in the movie, I don't even necessarily think it's Will's character that's like as much into Selma as it is like Artemis.
Oh no, Artemis is like into it.
Right. And then so it's like narratively, take it as its own thing. Great song.
It's a great song. Look, they got Stevie out of bed for it, which is great. They had Drew Hill, which I think this is a story I told on commentaries, but Cisco had blown up because of the Thong Song that year.
Right.
And so they because he was in this group called Drew Hill, and so they put him front and center, and the other Drew Hill guys are just kind of in the background, and that is what caused Drew Hill to break up.
Also thought Drew Hill was one person.
Nope. It's like 4 dudes. And that is why Drew Hill broke up. But yeah, it's great. They had Kumo D because Kumo D, the Wild Wild West, that is from a Kumo D song back in, it would have been the late 80s, early 90s. Just that part. Basically, the song is just at least 3 different things thrown together and then with Will Smith on top, because it's the Stevie Wonder song mixed with the Kumo D song, I think mixed with one more element, but I could be completely wrong. And then you add in your Will Smith.
That sounds just like the movie. You take your classic Western, your classic 90s misogynistic tropes, you take some action, put them together. Baby, you got a stew.
That's not a stew. That's peanut butter and mince.
Which I've had before.
What?
Yeah.
Is it good?
No, but
yeah.
I ate it.
And then when you were a kid once in Caesar's Palace, you went to the Warner Brothers store and bought nothing but peanut butter and mint candies.
Look, Wild Wild West, it's one I can't help but enjoy it.
Right.
I'm not going to say I feel guilty, but it is certainly one of those things where it's like I realize almost all of its shortcomings.
Right.
A lot I agree with you on. Some I don't. But even when I do, it's just like, all right.
You still like it. No, and you know what? There are a lot of movies that do not hold up or that I can look at, and if I wanted to, I could pick them apart. But I make a decision that, you know what? I like this, and I'm going to be okay with liking it. You like Wild Wild West, and you're going to be okay with it. I did not come in here thinking I was going to change your opinion, because if that would have happened, that would have happened over the week of me writing a draft.
And me stopping you every 5. I mean, I can't wait till we do.
Hey, did you get to the boobs part? Hey, did you get to the boobs part?
That's a funny line, though. No? When he's like, hey, how you doing? How's your mama? And he's like, yeah, I think it's funny. The audience can't see me pantomiming.
Yeah, he's pantomiming the bongo boob scene.
I can't wait till we do
right before he gets lynched.
Okay. Well, by the way, I also, at like whatever, I was in like 6th grade, I didn't put 2 and 2 together opposed to, I was like, how cool, a rubber band rope. That's
this is what
neat,
I'm saying. Like, weird
know?
things that kids were just like,
right. Yeah, I was like, cool, rubber band rope. I got to get me one of those. And then they use it later in the movie.
That's true.
So I was like, yeah, it's what's the thing? The Chekhov's gun. I was like,
Chekhov's rope, yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait to do Men in Black 2 with you, because that is another Will Smith one where I kept asking you. I was like, did you get to this joke? Because that's really funny.
This whole podcast is just going to be you being like, Danielle, what are you watching this week for trailers?
A lot of times I was like, ugh. But then when it gets to, because I think I was like, oh yeah, Men in Black 2 is not good. And then over the course of an hour, I kept interrupting you. It's like, but wait, this joke's really funny.
But wait, come on. What about this? There is one particular, and I'll save it for you to defend it at a later date. Sure. There is one particular joke, which is one of my least favorite jokes in the franchise, that Billy thinks is the funniest thing he's ever seen.
Is it Flush?
No, it's the.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So funny.
I hate it, and Billy I think you spent 20 minutes trying to convince me why it was funny.
And then I think I made you watch outtakes of scene.
You did watch outtakes.
It's very hard to convince someone no, you just don't realize this is funny.
No, but you don't. No, but see, if you look at it from this lens, it's the funniest thing you've ever seen in your life.
Well, regardless, Wild Wild West got swallowed up in what would be the biggest movie summers that I can remember. So maybe 10 years later, 2008. But Wild Wild West, I'm sorry that you had to watch it multiple times if you don't like it. I'm sorry that I didn't get to watch it multiple times. But you know what? I own the Blu-ray.
You do own the Blu-ray.
So maybe tonight I will go home and regale myself with more Wiki Wiki Wild Wild West.
Yeah, you can see that butt crack in living color.
Full backle nudity is the only way that I like my 1999 Western comedies. Yep. I do have to say, last thought, I know this is ridiculous, but in a weird way, Wild Wild West was like a gateway for me to watch more classic Westerns, because I was like, oh, I kind of like the cowboy aesthetic and stuff. And then my poor dad was like, well, this is not a Western. Let me show you a real Western.
Let me do my dad job.
And, whether or not the actors now are garbage human beings, but he showed me the Sergio Leone, the Man with No Name trilogy, and some old John Wayne stuff. So I really got into Westerns, oddly, from Wild Wild West.
That is very odd, but good dad work.
Yeah.
That's some good daddening.
Thanks, Dad. Danielle Radford, thank you for indulging me.
Of course. We just taped our regular office conversations.
Yeah, that's it.
We just walked over to a different spot in the office to tape it.
Can't wait for Men in Black 2. Thank you guys for listening, and I will see you guys next week.